Thank you for that very nice welcome. Now, I know sword fighting will be a very hard act to follow, but I'll give it a go. So, as you heard, I'm Darian Bird, and I'll be delving into the fourth theme, navigating growth, scaling, and securing digital infrastructure. So, Uli touched on this earlier. 78% of the community says that. Can you hear me now? Okay. Am I audible? Great. Okay, so 78% of the community says that cybersecurity is a board-level discussion topic. And naturally, that translates into 70% of you saying that it's also a tech modernization priority. What worked yesterday will not necessarily work tomorrow to secure your environment. And that translates into 92% of you, almost everybody saying that next year you expect to increase your budget for cybersecurity. And so why is it a board-level topic of discussion? It's because the digital landscape is changing. Your employee experience relies on the network and it relies on cybersecurity. They're working from home on home networks, they're working on their own devices, and sometimes they're engaging in what you might consider riskier behavior at home when they're less visible to the IT team at work. You need extra visibility. You need to be able to see what they're doing. And this isn't just about visiting sites that they wouldn't visit in the office. It's also about using tools like ChatGPT that they might not understand how they should be able to use them. They also demand equal experiences if they're in the home network or if they're in the office. They want low latency connectivity and they want ease of access. They don't want to spend the first 10 minutes of every day logging into a VPN. Customer experience also relies on the network and on security. You need seamless onboarding for customers at the branch with high-performance networks. They're consuming data-intensive workloads, video, whether it's telehealth or product info, and they need high-performance networks to access this. And while you're gathering all of this data, this customer data, this sensitive data at the edge, you need to decide how that's stored and secured, and your reputation relies on it. Next, you have connected machines. You have factory machines, you have mobile robotics in logistics centers, and you even have surveillance cameras sitting out in public in car parks. You need to decide, are you going to process that data at the edge, or are you going to send that streaming data across the network to the cloud, and how do you secure it in between? And then finally, we have AI, as we've talked about a lot, the new paradigm. You have third parties annotating medical images. You have employees submitting code into large language models, and you have training data leaked by chatbots. You need to figure out not only what is the opportunity in AI, but how to secure it. So as workplaces, customer delivery, and operational environments become more digital, complexity increases. We have emerging threats. AI, again, you're sitting there figuring out how you can safely, securely, and ethically produce solutions to target your customers, and threat actors are doing exactly the same thing. They're figuring out how AI can work better for them to target your customers. Phishing schemes are becoming hyper-personalized. Large language models allow threat actors to take large sources of data from social media, from compromised databases, and create hyper-personalized phishing schemes to target your customers. You also see a somewhat democratization of phishing, where in the past, you might be able to, a tech-savvy user, open an email, see by the strangely worded appeal to click on a button or log in here. But now with large language models, it's basically allowing them to refine their messaging and dupe more savvy users. And we also have deepfakes improving every single day. I know earlier this year, I had Elon Musk essentially asking me on a daily basis to invest in his cryptocurrency scheme, and I never quite knew if it was real or not. And then you have state actors. In the past, there was almost this perverse level of trust between cyber criminals and their targets. The victim needed to know that they could trust that they would get their data unencrypted if they paid the ransom. With a state actor, it's different. The motivation is not about financing, it's about creating chaos. So state actors, we've seen hybrid warfare increasing just in the last week with undersea cables in Europe being cut. We're starting to see attacks on critical infrastructure like energy infrastructure, telecommunications, hospitals. We'll see this increasing as we move into a multipolar world. On top of that, we also have a distributed enterprise. You have more devices in the network, you have more applications in cloud. It's becoming more complex. You need to have tools to profile devices as they enter the network because you can't do it manually. To assign a certain level of trust to each device, you need network segmentation and granular control to identify which devices can be accessing the internet, which can access only certain domains, and which customers can access which segments of the network. And finally, you have resiliency in this hyper-connected world. In the past, if a network went down, it was a little inconvenient for your employees. Today, it affects customer delivery, and it can affect your employees more. So failover needs to not only be instant, it needs to be able to ensure that customer services are not interrupted and calls aren't dropped. So we asked the community here, what are your top challenges in relation to cybersecurity? So they usually revolve around manageability and understanding risk. The biggest challenge you can see there at 38% is managing third-party risk. With supply chains highly integrated and data flowing across them, it can be difficult to gain visibility into how you can trust third and even fourth parties. Unfortunately, many breaches don't happen at the source of the data. They happen at third parties, but the reputational damage is just the same if the breach happens there and your customers can't trust you to manage their data. The second risk that the community said they feel is about employee security awareness. This has not been solved. Education and testing programs around security need to continue, and even security-savvy employees need to understand that the threat landscape is changing. What they used to know before may not apply today. They need to be aware of these changes. And these need to be supplemented with tools like multi-factor authentication, email filtering, and tools to allow you to open up higher risk files or websites in a safe environment. Even the most security-savvy user can let their guard down just for a moment, and that's all it takes. The third bubble you can see there at 34% is the other greatest challenge around accurately assessing security posture and risk. The environment is so complex these days. It's distributed. It's very difficult to see the configurations that you have at the branch and no longer just at the data center. So you need tools that can accurately assess the configurations and misconfigurations and update them automatically. Standardization and centralization of management are the best tools to tackle this problem. So another thing we asked the community was about how AI is being used to enhance your cybersecurity. So if I could ask for a show of hands, and please don't be shy, how many of you are using some form of AI to enhance your cybersecurity? A handful. I would say this is probably the earliest use case where AI actually had some impact. And it's because SOCs these days cannot handle, with just human operators, the number of alerts coming in without some sort of AI enhancement. There's thousands of alerts coming in, and a human operator can't investigate them all. So we spoke to the community, and almost 70% said it can help them detect threats faster. And this is because it allows you to identify false positives. It allows you to prioritize threats that you need to investigate, and it allows you to correlate multiple alerts to understand what is really going on to investigate them. Another area, 66% you can see, is about improved handling of complex threats. So the challenge here is that many threats these days are multi-staged. They build on top of one another. And AI can help identify these subtle hints that a human operator may not be able to see. The idea being essentially that a phishing email may come in and you receive an alert about that, and strange activity on the network happens, and AI can identify the correlation between the two and ask a human to investigate. Behavioral analytics is another tool in the AI suite where you can essentially take a user or a device and identify anomalous behavior. So you can essentially authenticate them, but continue monitoring. And so if they start behaving strangely, downgrade their permissions and investigate further. So network and security delivery models are also evolving. You can see the first one here around security platforms. This is essentially platformization of security. We have the vendors, the larger vendors, the networking and security vendors acquiring competitors and acquiring adjacent players. And even some of the smaller vendors are adding to their portfolios. The idea being that you can purchase multiple modules from a single vendor. Here, the goal is to decrease complexity. Again, it's about standardization, about creating a single pane of glass where in an event where you need to hurry, you aren't flicking between multiple vendors' systems, which often will be overlapping, and you can also onboard new employees very quickly so they don't have to learn multiple systems. The other delivery model that we're seeing changing is around network and security convergence. So this is not necessarily a new trend. We've seen the vendors talking about this for a long time, but we have found in the last couple of years, we're starting to see enterprises adopting this. And it's not just about purchasing software or a service from a telco that's converged. It's about changing your organizational structure. It's about integrating the network team with the security team, and that takes hard work. And then the third point here is around security and resiliency converging. Again, in the past, resiliency was about producing backups in case hardware failed or if there was an outage because an employee made a human error. Now, the number one cause of outages is ransomware. So we're seeing this convergence between security and resiliency. Often we're even seeing resiliency vendors shifting more into security. They're producing tools like real-time encryption detection so that you can identify ransomware as it's happening rather than afterwards and having to solve it. And then the last two here, cloud-enabled SASE and Zero Trust Access. We'll talk a bit more on the next slide about. Okay, so this slide here is where we asked the community about which network and security tools you're using and which ones you're using on-prem versus in the cloud. So you can see by far the number one tool is an on-prem firewall, 73% of the community. So this is a tool that is not going away in a hurry. It's not shifting to the cloud immediately. When we've asked CIOs and CISOs about this, they say the reason is they've invested very heavily in their on-prem systems and they would need a very compelling reason to shift to the cloud. So they're happy to have them sitting in their data centers, sometimes at the edge, and they won't be shifting to cloud in a hurry. Another very mature technology, the second one along is MPLS at 55% of the community. Right next to it is SD-WAN at 53%. So these are no longer mutually exclusive technologies. In the past, the main benefit of moving from MPLS to an SD-WAN was cost cutting. You could replace that expensive MPLS with cheaper broadband. But that's no longer the case. We're seeing increasingly, yes, that's part of the return on investment equation, but organizations want higher performance and they want resiliency. They want link bonding and dynamic routing, and they also want dual links, being able to use band and 5G, for example. Once we move past there, we start to move into the SASE or secure service edge technologies in the cloud. So you can see there 45% of the community is using Zero Trust Network Access, ZTNA. We saw a huge uptick during the pandemic. Organizations realized that their on-prem VPN infrastructure simply wasn't scalable. They had to move to the cloud. to be able to allow employees to work from home. And a similar thing is happening with secure web gateways. 35% of the community is already using a secure web gateway. What we see is these are two SASE technologies. We don't usually see a SASE adopted all in one. It's usually about solving a use case, adopting a module, adopting another module, and eventually having a full suite. So a secure web gateway is basically about replacing your on-prem proxy with a similar service in the cloud. And here the benefit is, first of all, scalability, but also you no longer need to manage that infrastructure. You don't need to manually update the email filtering lists. You don't need to manage the physical infrastructure. You can repurpose them and save money on that and the licenses and have it all in the cloud. And this is particularly true when you have your distributed workforce already working from home, away from the corporate network, accessing cloud workloads, and they can go directly via a gateway in the cloud. And then finally, you can see 21% on the very far side of the community is using a CASB. This is still in the early stages. This is usually the journey we see. Zero trust network access, secure web gateway, and later organizations adopt a CASB. A CASB is about reining in shadow IT with cloud and gaining visibility over, and also enforcing policies across multiple clouds to have a consistent security posture. So I would expect to see a bit of an uptake in CASB over the next couple of years as employees start using tools like ChatGPT. So once you're using tools like ChatGPT to analyze code or corporate data, IT needs more visibility over that and the ability to enforce policies over that. So my last slide here are basically three takeaways. So the first one is around vendor consolidation and standardization. As I mentioned, it's about simplifying management and reducing the learning curve for new employees. It's not going to be suitable for everyone. Large organizations who already have a workforce can take a best-of-breed approach. For the mid-market, it's particularly attractive, being able to replace one or two vendors opportunistically, not all of them, with a single provider. Standardization is about improving your security posture by having the same configurations for potentially vendors across branches and workplaces. The second point here is around cloud-native security. This, as I mentioned, is a journey. It's not about adopting a SASE all in one go. It's about solving those use cases as you move more and more into the cloud. And then finally is around peer-to-peer management. So this is about coming to events like these and events organized by security vendors, understanding from your peers and even your competitors, what are the challenges that they face and what are the solutions that they're using. Security can be a differentiator. It can help your customers to know that you're securing their data, they can trust you, and they can also trust that when they come to use your digital services, they'll be available and resilient. But at the same time, security and resiliency is an industry-wide problem, and we need to tackle it together. So cyber criminals will really only start to lose motivation if we put up a united front and help each other. So thank you, first of all, for your attention, but also for contributing to the community. It helps to see.